Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Saturday, May 18th, 2024, and today we are going to be talking about Donald Trump's overconfidence problem and the 2024 presidential election. Now, Donald Trump in his Wildwood rally, Wildwood, New Jersey, said that he was going to win New Jersey, that he was officially making a play for this state that hasn't been a battleground state in quite literally decades on the presidential level. New Jersey is a state that Joe Biden won by 16 points, Hillary Clinton won by 15 points. This is a very blue state. And yet, Donald Trump seems to believe that he has the ability to flip this blue state red. Now, one thing, it is certainly very interesting that the Trump campaign has chosen to campaign in the state of New Jersey. But I think it speaks to a longer problem that we've seen existing since January from the Trump campaign of overconfidence going into this November election. To put it very succinctly, the polls right now show very good results for President Trump. They show him up by 7 to 9 points in battleground states like Georgia, Arizona, and Nevada. And if these polls were to be entirely accurate, it would make sense that the Trump campaign feels very secure in some of these battleground states and is looking to expand the map in some of the states that are less supportive of President Biden compared to some of the other safe Democratic states. For instance, neighboring Delaware and Maryland and New York are all Biden plus 25 or more, and so it makes sense that they are going for the state of New Jersey. But ultimately, this is a state that is a very blue one through and through. And based on the numbers that we see here, only one singular poll has been done this election season. And although it does show President Biden ahead with a 7-point advantage, in reality, it's going to be quite substantially higher. And so what I think we have been starting to see is the Trump campaign looking at a lot of these data points and looking at the internal ones that they have as well, that they don't release to the public, that showed Donald Trump ahead in these battleground states. And they're deciding, okay, where are we going to go to next? And so they looked at the 2020 electoral map and they decided to look, okay, maybe a state like New Jersey, where Trump, lost the state by roughly 16 points. It would be, in theory, in reach if you're seeing the swings that you're seeing in these battleground states occur on the national level. Newsflash, we're not. And so they're looking at some of these states as well. Not only New Jersey, maybe they're going for states like Minnesota or New Hampshire, which would typically be in the realm of possibility. But we know that this election seems to be very different. And that the Trump campaign, in terms of what they can extend to, Minnesota and New Hampshire actually make a lot more sense than New Jersey. But New Jersey really makes no sense whatsoever. I think we're looking at this move here and a decision from the Trump campaign as one that really shows a fundamental problem. That they aren't understanding this election the same way the Biden campaign is either. And a lot of it has to do with ego as well. The Trump campaign and Donald Trump himself refused to accept that they lost the 2020 presidential election. We actually saw Donald Trump just 2 days ago say that he won the state of Minnesota, which obviously was not true, and Biden won the state by roughly 8 points. And so when you have a formerly elected official, President Trump himself, coming out publicly saying, we won Minnesota, we won these battleground states, refusing to concede the last election, it makes a lot of sense that this delusion, in essence, is translating not only to the battleground states, but also to the safe states. It reminds me a lot of when Donald Trump in the 2016 election said that he won the state of California, and that it was voter fraud that lost him the national popular vote and lost him in the state of California, when Hillary Clinton, in reality, won by 30.1%. Now, I personally reject any and all ideas that the 2020 or 2016 or any election was truly stolen. I think at the end of the day, especially in the 2020 presidential election, there were so many unfounded claims made by the former president himself that were disproven time and time again, even by Republican judges and Republican courts. And so when I see things like that, I really reject this idea, because even Donald Trump's own yes men couldn't come up with enough evidence, couldn't come up with enough of a constitutional claim to back up anything that he was saying related to the 2020 election. And so when he makes outlandish claims about winning states he didn't actually win, in a way I am numb to it, but I entirely expect it. But numbers like this, or comments like this rather, are ones that I think I should be expecting, but I think really help reveal a bigger problem at play from the Trump side, at least in my own opinion. And I'm not the only one who's looking at this from the lens of it might be a delusional take here. We see Insider New Jersey says, Trump's delusionary is taking full force in this state. Because everybody knows, anybody who's native to the state of New Jersey knows that this state is not going to flip red. Right? They look at the 2020 electoral map here where Joe Biden won on the new map, 303 electoral votes to Trump's 235. And you see that out of all of the states for Trump to target, it makes no sense that New Jersey would be one of them. And yet, here he is in Wildwood, New Jersey, saying officially that the Trump campaign is going to be making a play for this state. And I think some Republicans have seemed to take up this opinion that it was a, 4D chess move, that it was a decision being made that would enter into the Philadelphia markets, that would bring people over from Pennsylvania, and in a way would be a play for both New Jersey and Pennsylvania. Well, let me be the first, or the one of many, many reputable people, as I think have also said this too, the first to reject that idea. This idea that he is making a play for New Jersey because it is secretly benefiting him in Pennsylvania. Because that is absolutely not what is happening here. What Donald Trump is doing by going to New Jersey is exactly what the Democrats have thought his campaign has been doing for a while. And that is believing that the swing states are already locked down, and now it's about expanding the map. Now, I had the privilege of meeting somebody, and I say privilege because I think it's very cool to meet people who are very involved in the political spaces. And I got to meet with, one of Trump's high-end campaign officials, and there was a conversation being had where it was generally about, where does the Trump campaign think they're most solid in? And this Trump campaign official essentially had said, and I'm paraphrasing, obviously, no direct quotes from this at all, but had essentially said that this campaign is locking down the swing states. But they know, and they use these words, they know that the Trump campaign has already, won this election in essence, right? They said they know that half this country, if not more, has already written off Joe Biden for another term. And so it's about locking that down and expanding the electoral map. Now, I do not think that that take is entirely accurate. And I think it's one that is commonly shared, though, amongst conservative consultants, amongst conservative leaders, that this election Biden has already lost. And now it's about where you should run up the margins. Because it is that same type of thinking, that same type of denialism about the reality of a competitive election that lost Donald Trump the race in 2020. The Washington Post did an interesting analysis just days before the election, where they talked about, amidst the pandemic, where Trump and Biden traveled the most often to. And they found that the two most popular states, rightfully so, were Pennsylvania and Florida, two states that were ultimately decided by single digits and less than 5%. But when you take a look at where the Biden campaign traveled with Kamala Harris, you find that it was really condensed. They traveled to D.C. and Delaware, which makes sense. That's where they had their campaign HQ for a while before they moved to Philadelphia for the Biden HQ, and Delaware is Biden's home state. Outside of that, there was a surprising stop in Tennessee and Utah, but beyond that, the rest of the states that were 100% within play: Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Ohio, North Carolina, Georgia, Florida, Texas, Arizona, and Nevada. A fundraiser stop in New York, maybe a singular rally, but ultimately speaking, you are looking at Biden and Harris traveling to the states that absolutely mattered. The Trump campaign wasn't the exact same. The Trump campaign decided to use their time a little bit more interestingly. They decided also to visit New Jersey back in 2020, but they also visited Maine. They visited Nebraska, Oklahoma, Louisiana, Tennessee, South Carolina, Indiana, Montana. Interesting, if you ask me. Because I look at this and I am really cautious because I look at it and I tell myself, why is it that they were all over the map? Sure, the Trump and Pence campaign were a lot more on the ground than the Biden campaign. I'll give them that. But there is quite literally no reason and no business outside of maybe some speculation that one race might be competitive in Montana in the Senate race or for some reason in Tennessee. I think it's a very interesting thing that in 2020, a lot of the states that were focused on, rightfully so for the Trump campaign, were swing states. But for some of them, they were not. And I think it really displayed exactly the level of thinking that we are also seeing now in the 2024 election, where the Trump campaign was looking at this and saying, the polls were wrong in 2016. We know where our bases are. We're probably going to win said bases. And they were right in some ways. But they didn't win over independent voters. They didn't win over the voters they needed, especially the ones from the 2016 election, in order to win the presidential election. This time, they are adopting the same type of, blinders that are on them for this campaign season in believing that the races are now about expanding the map rather than winning in a few key crucial battleground states. Because one thing has been clear from the Biden side of the campaign. They're here to replicate their 2020 election victory. The Biden campaign has only announced any efforts out of all of the states in one state that Trump won in 2020, and that is the state of North Carolina. That is the literal singular state where the Biden and Harris campaign have promised to do heavy, research into, heavy amounts of funding for field offices and volunteers, etc. I mean, they are talking about a full force campaign in North Carolina, but look everybody else. They aren't talking about going to a state like Mississippi and saying we're going to win here. Because New Jersey is just as blue as Mississippi is red. New Jersey is just as blue as Montana is red. And so for Donald Trump to be coming out here and saying, I'm not only going to campaign for New Jersey, but we're going to win New Jersey, is next level delusion. And I think that is the only way we can put it. And again, the problem that existed in New Jersey, this statement being here, is a microcosm of the thinking that we are seeing across the country for the Trump campaign. Because now he's going to the Bronx. Now think about a region of the state of New York that is going to be the least beneficial for the Trump campaign, and yet that's where Donald Trump said, I'm going to go. And you know what might be feeding that delusion is the 2022 governor election results that showed Lee Zeldin within a 6-point margin in the state of New York. Kathy Hochul won by 6.4% in a state Joe Biden won by over 25. I mean, you can see here he won, roughly 25, 23 points. And yet, President Trump thinks this is where he's going to go. That this is where, he is going to go, holding a campaign event here for the first time, because he didn't do it in 2020, for the first time since 2016 when he held a rally in Buffalo, New York. A very different political geography, literal geography, from the Bronx. And so it is so fascinating to see that the Trump campaign is now starting to target some of these states. It is extended beyond New Jersey too. They are talking about winning Virginia. They're talking about winning states that they quite literally have less than a 5% chance at winning at. And the investment of resources in this state and in these states is going to be detrimental to the Trump campaign, because it is this type of thinking that loses you an election. It's the same reason why I think, too, when we see these headlines about Nikki Haley being on a roll in the primaries despite dropping out, that in key and crucial battleground states, in fact, also not battleground states, but just states that could be reflective of the National Republican Party. For instance, my home state of Maryland, we just held our primary. We talked about it on the Senate level, but on the presidential level, Nikki Haley got roughly 20% of the vote. This was a closed primary amongst only registered Republicans who registered well in advance. It's not same-day registration where Democrats are switching over to the Republican side. No, these are actual Republicans. And nearly 1 in 4 of them said that they want Nikki Haley over Donald Trump, despite Nikki Haley being out for over 2 months now. And so when we see results like those, the Trump campaign responds and says, we've already unified the party. Look at the polls. The same polls that said we were going to lose in 2016 and said we were going to be blown out in 2020. In fact, they believe the 2020 election was stolen, and so they don't even consider that as a realm of possibility for what might happen again in 2024. And so I think a lot of why they're writing off a lot of the very real warning signs, not only the ones about Nikki Haley, but also the ones where we see where Biden is leading Trump amongst donations and also doing better than he did in 2020 amongst donor groups, whereas Donald Trump is doing worse. I mean, there are plenty of indicators here that would indicate the election is a lot more competitive than Donald Trump would like to let on, especially given that he's campaigning in states that are deep, deep blue states here. But they're ignoring it because of these blinders. This idea that the Trump campaign is locked down and solid, that they're going to win the election, and now it's a question not if, but by how much do they win by. And that's so incredibly fascinating. Because I think this is really where you're going to see the Biden campaign really pick back up. When Donald Trump and his campaign adopts an ideology similar to this one, it puts them right back where they were in 2020, a losing electoral strategy. The Biden campaign internally has said, Joe Biden and his own campaign staffers do not believe the polls. And I think on one end, that could be taken as them doing the same exact thing as I am accusing the Trump campaign of doing right now. But I absolutely think there's much more merit in believing that polls that show Biden losing Nevada by 13 points are not entirely accurate versus ignoring the swing states. Or in conjunction with swing states, when you have limited resources and quite frankly, you have limited money, you're going to states that do not matter in the grand scheme of things. Because I'm telling you this now, and it will be entirely true this coming November, Donald Trump will not win the state of New Jersey. He will not win the state of Virginia. He will not win the state of Colorado. There is no reason to put in the effort in some of these states. And the Biden campaign knew that in 2020. And they'll know it again for 2024. Based on where the Biden campaign is focusing on, they are having, many conversations. Where can we win? What can we win? And they're maxing out at 319 electoral votes with North Carolina included. What they're doing right now is strictly defense. They're focusing on winning the same states they did in the last election, and that's all they need. Because it brings them to 270. Even if you take away Arizona, Georgia, and Nevada, Biden still wins the election. And so Democrats, quite frankly, have options in a way that Republicans do not. And while the numbers may look strong for Donald Trump right now, they may not be in a few months. And that investments, those field offices you're opening up in states like New Jersey, and the focus and emphasis of your time and energy on these states that are not even close to being battleground states may prove to be fruitless this coming November. And if it does, and the Trump campaign loses by a similar margin, a lot of questions will be had. Where did we go wrong? And a lot of it will have to do with the fact that they went into this election thinking there was no way they lose it. They look at Biden's approvals, they look at the polls, and they say we're absolutely solid. But a lot of other indicators here may be indicating the opposite reaction, the opposite outcome in this election. Only time will tell to see which indicators are actually correct. And it will be very interesting to see as time goes on. But I say this because the Trump campaign right now and Donald Trump himself seem to be campaigning with blinders in a way that makes them seem very delusional about the current state of the race. Even though they may be leading, it's very quick to see Republicans fall in a lot of these states, and never underestimate the Republican Party's ability to lose an election that is entirely within reach. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch, and then a playlist for my 2024 presidential election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all later today.